conversation with Lula Gardner Relaford at her home in Port Arthur, Texas on August 26, 1981, interviewed by Sybil Boland. Down Las Palmas, I think, was the main street down by the nursery.
We would come out close to the railroad crossing over there, but it wasn't 25th Street. I don't remember just which, but it was one of these streets back here. And of course, I drove through this hundreds of times while I lived at Village Mills, visiting my children down here. But since I've been here, well, I knew it was coming, of course, I just got so I couldn't see. I had to quit trying to drive. And I really do miss my driving and miss my car. So finally I kept my car, and I'd say, well, a miracle might happen, and I could drive again. Then I finally I said, well, that old car's sitting there, and I'll have to pay insurance and everything on it. If I can drive again, if a miracle does happen, I'll get another car.
There you go. Absolutely.
And so I got rid of my car, but I sure did hate to get rid of my car. But I'm so glad I'm down here.
I'm glad that you feel
because I was so alone up there with it was so far and everything.
Well, now, was that your family place? How did you happen to live in Village Mills? Were you born there?
Originally, I was born there. My parents were married. My grandfather, Gardner, lived way on out there. You've heard of Hicksboro Avenue.
Yes.
There. It was in a little past that area. And then they came there, and they were early settlers in there, And then my mother's family, they were Boers, and they had moved from, they called it always the River Swamp, back in there behind Spurg or some Silsby and in there somewhere on the river, and they moved out there about 3 miles from Village Mills. Well, you see, my parents met over there, and then they married and lived in Village Mills. That is, they'd go back and forth, back and forth. Now, my daddy, however, in those days, he was several years older than my mother. I mean, about 11 or 12 years older. So he was considered an old bachelor, and he had built him a little log cabin. In those days, it was quite common for people to homestead, so he was homesteading out there.
That was in the Village Mills area?
It's what
up at
a little hot area.
Oh, yes.
But then, you see, but later, we lived all around in there, different places, But what I started to say, I was born there. My parents, they lived there part of the season. They'd go back to the log cabin a part of the year. They'd move back to the sawmill a part of the year, back and forth, whichever was easiest to make a little crop and do a little sawmilling. And finally, though, it just came that my parents bought that place there about in 26, I believe. They bought that piece of property there where I lived.
Now, how do you designate that? Does that road have a name?
Is what?
Does that road have a name, or how did you tell someone where you lived?
When I moved up there, and I had so many deliveries made and moving and so on, they got so that all the delivery people, or trucking people, well, they'd call it the Gardner Road. But so far as I know, nobody else ever did that. But that little piece of road from Waddell's back up there to the corner, you see, to my place, well, in fact, where the Harkes lived there, that was originally a piece of my parents' property. They sold it to the Harkes, you see. So all of that strip, you might say, was along the Gardner, that little Gardner Road. And
there's some trailers in there now, aren't there? Are there some trailers, house trailers?
Yes,
in there?
they bought that years ago from my father. And I suppose they're still there. And then, you see, when my parents died, well, my mother died in 43 and my father died in 49. Well, then naturally, you see, the property, we fell heir to the property, the land. And, but still, while it was in the process, before they died, they knew that this little oil development was coming in there, you know. And it was really a pretty big thing, you know, for the small field. But anyway, we divided it into 5 parts, you see, equally between we 5 children. There was 2 brothers and 3 sisters. You see.
How many acres did you have there originally?
Well, by that time, I'm not sure, but about 69 acres, I think. By that time, my parents had sold off some. They originally had 88 acres, I believe. But it was land was so cheap in those days, you know, when they first got it. And of course, it's increased in value now, you know.
Did one of the creeks run through your property, or did it go that far back?
No, it runs right near the corner of it. Hickory Creek runs almost there. So it happened that when my parents had lived on the north corner, and so my brother then lived there. And when I started to build, well, my husband, of course, I've been married several times. My husband's died. I had been married 2 years. Well, just 1 year. And he had a home in Fort Neches, but
what was his name?
I didn't want to live there, you know, and he didn't. We were happy to build a home up there, so he started with me to build the house up there. I was going to pay for it because I didn't, I worked every way I could to keep anyone else from getting involved. I didn't want to get involved with his family property. He had children, and I didn't want to be involved in that, so we had that understood.
Very wise.
But anyhow, while we were building, he died.
Oh.
Well, anyway, I went on and completed the building, you see, and built the home, and I lived there for 13 years alone, you know, trying to hold it together. And so then Jack, my brother Jack, built next door to me, and then my sister, another sister, she lives in the Groves and did at that time, but they started to build. And her husband got sick, and they left it. They sold out. The other strip there was for my other sister, but she sold it to her daughter and son-in-law. But my brother, he continued to live there as long as he lived on that corner, you know, on that corner. So when it came, I chose that spot down there because it was kind of cleared up. It was so much in the thicket, but it turned out that my piece of property had 4 oil wells on it. Now, the mineral was equally divided, you see. That didn't mean I had any more. I had equally, it was equally divided. But I had all those old oil wells on my property, and I had that old road on there, you know, passing through back there. And I really didn't think I had anything to sell, you know. In fact, I couldn't sell it. And with all that, nobody would buy it, you know. And the others all sold it. Well, of course, then the production stopped. It stopped producing. And so when the production stopped, well, the lease that ended the lease. And then the oil company went in there and they repaired all the damage that they did, you see. And they did a lot of work there to get the place fixed up. And then they leased the road from me to pay me, you see, help me. And they really were good to me. They really were wonderful to me.
Which company was this? Was that
That was
Arco?
Atlantic Richfield. And but after all those years, and I thought, well, I didn't, but it came out, it just turned out real fine for me. And so I'm so glad that I that I got away from there, and I'm glad that I'm happy that it seemed like the people that bought it, they're very pleased, you know, and they are happy with it. And so
You've lived here in Griffin about a year and a half?
I've been living here about a year and a half. I moved here the latter part of January or 1st of February in last year in 80. And so, but, you know, I can't help but think about it. Finding oil on your property. I think what a story I would have loved to have made of that. You know, all the excitement, all the money you're going to get.
Oh, what? Well, why don't you write that
No,
for
I
us?
couldn't. But, you know, nobody can imagine all the plans and all the imagination and all the excitement that can come. And really, there was a lot of money got me out of that Austria. But it's the excitement of expectation, you know, that of course we never didn't begin to realize. We didn't know what to expect.
The sky's the limit. Oh, that's wonderful.
But anyway, we had a good time waiting to see. No, I couldn't write it. But it really was. And I said, I don't know how to say it, but I said, just as it began, well, I built a flare, and then when it ended, I moved away. Well, I didn't plan it that way. It seemed like it was just fate or economics or whatever you would call it, you know. That,
But it fit into your lifespan.
Yes, it fitted in. But really, I was, I believe that it was some of the best time of my life living there, you know. And, so
Well, do
I
you-
look back on it with all kind of regrets and sadness and glad too I'm not there.
Mm-hmm. Would you mind my asking how old you are?
Oh, no, I don't mind. I don't mind. You know, it's a funny thing. I come over here to church. No, they have what is the old, they call it the Golden Age group in the church, and there's a pretty good crowd there, you know. So it was just before Mother's Day, I believe. And so this leader, he wanted to know who's the oldest lady. But here I am, I go and stick my hand up. I said, everybody knows how old I am. There's no secret. But I'll be 85 in October. And so I said at first, well, I don't think about it, but I'll tell you, I think there is so many people. Now, not all people, not by any means. There's a lot better off than I am. But I see so many people younger than I am until I don't know, it makes me feel bad to see them in such bad shape, you know.
Yes.
And
We count our blessings.
yes. And so, but it took me a while to get to decide. You see, I had eye surgery last summer. July was a year ago, and it was not a success. And it was very frustrating to me. And it was really a joke to me to turn out the way it did. And then different things happened until kind of threw me. And I didn't go to church, and I didn't meet many people. And finally, though, and everybody welcomed me so well, and they were so nice and friendly, and so I finally got my letter moved and started going to church over there, you know.
Which church do you go to?
Trinity Baptist. It's on the
Oh, yes, very close.
there, you know. And so,
Do they pick you up in the bus, or how do you
well, I don't go to Sunday school. No, my children takes me.
I
you
see.
know. And some, but if I be over there, they pick up for Sunday school,
I see.
but they don't pick up just for church. Now, they bring me home sometimes. But my children always, they're glad, either my son or my daughter. Our friends, I have someone that's always glad to give me a lift, you know. But I wouldn't mind to walk over there if it wasn't crossing 32nd over there.
That doesn't make a
I don't
problem.
want to cross that too bad. And they could have a fit if I did.
Did you know that this is the 100th anniversary of Village Mills?
The 100th. No, I didn't.
I was reading an article by W.T. Block and that he wrote in 1978, and he said that the mill was established in 1881. So I assumed that the establishment of the mill must have been the beginning of the village.
Well,
Or was
now I say right now, I have forgotten it. I think I did know that. I think I had realized that in the past, but I hadn't thought about it this year or last year. But in the past, because, yes, and I don't know. I had written what, mostly from my childhood memories of what is left, the impressions that I got from my childhood memories. And then later, as time went on, was verified by the things that I saw and knew, you know. But I imagine I think I might have that somewhere. But
I surely
I
would.
got that from my parents, you know.
I would love to read anything that you've written, if you have anything available.
Miss Merriman had written to me and asked me for the Village Mill story, and I'm sorry that I didn't send it to her. But it just looks like I just didn't get to it, and every day I think about it. And she said if I had, I don't want to give away the last copy I have, but I found out that I have, I think I have 2 copies left.
Well, if you've got a copy that I could borrow, I could go to the library and copy it and bring it right back.
But you see, these memories, and as time goes on, now you see, I can remember the day of the Galveston storm.
Really?
And you see, and I was about 4 years old at that time. But somehow, when you can think those things stay with you. And I can remember the sort of the awesome, the kind of fear that people had, that's what makes me remember. It was such an awful thing. Now, the way I'm sure that they got the message was by Western Union, I suppose, they didn't have
The
phones.
telegraph.
But they would have a message. They had telegraph, I believe they called it those days. But they got the message about the storm. And I can see those dark gray clouds hanging all around, and how afraid that I was when I climbed up on my daddy's knee, and the people all began to gather around and wait to hear the news, and everybody, they knew there was so much destruction, and we had no way of knowing, or at least the people the older people in those days, they didn't know but what everything. They'd be wiped out too, you know. Village meals and everything else. I suppose I can imagine that's the way they felt from the way that I remember it, you know. And but I can see the old post office and the old depot and the old commissary and all of those things. If I could paint, I could just sit down and paint them out, you know.
Well, can you describe to me where they were located in comparison to where things are today?
Well, now the commissary was right there in the corner where the road goes out to maintenance. What else? Now the road has widened. You see, we had on the wagon trails at that time. I mean, they're just wide enough for wagons. There was no automobiles. And so the roads were narrow, what we call roads, but they were just trails, you might say. Well, of course, the highways there, going out to Hickory Creek, and north and south, they have widened until they've taken a lot of space in there, of course, you know. So that sort of puts, misplaces things in a way. But the old commissary was right there in the corner, and I mean toward the road that turns off going to Wildwood. Oh, on the other side. No, but I mean it's toward that. I mean on the south side. What I'm trying to say.
I see. Yes.
It's on this on the south side of the Hickory Creek Road. Let me get my story. See if I can put my hands on.
All right. Fine.
One thing though I left out in there that I was sorry. I left out the hotel. There was a hotel there. Now, we had there in the corner of the Hickory Creek Road, on the south side was the commissary. Well, diagonally across there was the post office, down toward the Wildwood Road. Then the depot was a little back north, you see.
Yes.
Across, by the railroad, of course, the post office and the railroad. Depot, of course, was on the same side. And then the hotel was across the road from the depot on the other side of the road from the commissary. And then the old town hall, it was next door to the commissary. It was used in the years past. In those days, a lot for church or for school or for different things, you know, community gatherings and so on.
Is that the building that is now the Methodist Church?
No. There is not one thing there. There is nothing there that was there in those days, anywhere around there. No, that old building was just an old rough box building, you know, built out of 12-inch boards. Everything there was built out of these boards, you see, and out of the same lumber, because I'm sure they came. And then the sawmill, you see, was back out in the area behind the other side of the railroad from the depot.
There's a little dirt road that goes back in there now. That's an oil field road.
Yes, but that isn't the one. Now, we lived right there later. My parents lived there, I mean, after I was 6 or 7 years, at the time I'm talking about.
Yes.
Well, we lived right in there on that road. And now, I don't believe there is one single house I can remember that was there at that time. But the old slab pit burned back in there, you know. And I remember there was a time when there were some people up toward the front on the railroad that had some biting dogs, and my mother was scared of them. They didn't have them on, but she was afraid. She'd send me and my brother to the commissary, and we'd have to go around the road by the slab pit, you see, to avoid those dogs. We were scared to death. We were more afraid that way than we were of the dogs. But anyway, we lived back in there. And that's where we lived. When I went to the post office, I was 7 years old, 6 and 7 years old. And I have my sister that lives in the Groves was born there. Her birth is recorded in the Kunz birth records there. She's the only one, because she was the only one that was born there after the birth records, became a law.
What's her name?
Joffrion, Joffrion. And, but her, Thelma is her name. Thelma Gardner, born 1903. And I was looking to see what other records I might find, and that was her birth record. Her birth was recorded. But I had another brother that was born in Village Mills, but his birth was not recorded, and neither was mine. And while we lived there, one reason I had to take so much of responsibility was during this typhoid. Now, in writing about Village Mills, I didn't put anything personal in it. Something I didn't much want to put personal. But when we lived there, well, we had this terrible typhoid, I guess almost an epidemic around there. And my family all had typhoid. That is, my father, my mother, my father. Mama took it first. And my two brothers. That's all there was in the family. But I didn't have it.
How could you be so fortunate?
Well, I could run the errands. And that's why I had to go to the post office, and of course the people were good, and the commissary delivered things and all like that, but still I was a little girl, and I just learned to go, but I'd go pick up the mail. I think we'd have mail from the family that lived off. They also had typhoid, like at Doucette and Colemanville and around. And I don't know, I just learned to get out that way, And that's why I was going to the post office, and why I remember those things so well. And so what a pitiful sight they all were from that typhoid, And I can't ever forget how they looked, They had fever so many days, and they were starved, They didn't feed them. They didn't treat them then. I don't know how they treat typhoid today. But then they didn't eat, and they starved. And I'll tell you, their bones just stuck out all, the joints. And my youngest brother, poor little thing, where after he got up a little better off, where he could move around a little, where he'd sit, the bones, it just made sores on his little seat. They were just skeletons. And yet I know that my daddy's sister came down there from around Doucette. She came to visit him. And, well, we had a colored woman, though, that stayed there to do the cooking and the housework somehow. Don't ask me how come, but I have an idea that it might have been supplied by what we called the day welfare. I don't know why and how. But she was a very good cook, and she took care of things well. And my daddy liked turnip greens. Well, my aunt came down there, and she knew that I'd like turnips and the greens, and she brought some, and she went in, and she told this Fanny, she said, "Now, Fanny, you cook these with a good piece of pork." And so when she got those cooked, and my aunt carried them in and gave them to my daddy, and he ate them, and he almost died. you see, from eating that food. Well, anyhow, they didn't feed them. They lived on broth at that time, just broth. And so there was a lot of people around there had this typhoid. But I didn't go to school. In those days, children didn't start to school until they were 8. Well, we moved away from there at that time, and we never did, that it was years before we moved back there, you see, right in Village Mills. We lived around in the area. But then I lost, we moved 4 or 5 miles out in the country there. And, but it was in when I was really a little girl that I remember Village Mills so well, you know. Living there and the experience that I
Well,
had.
I just appreciate so much your sharing this with me. And I brought some pictures now from the post office dedication. I'd like
Well, I
to show you.
didn't really know you were interested in Village Mills.